Aboro, Aboye, Aboshesha. Ekabo, everyone. Tonight's subject is going to be taboos. But before I get into that, let me open with the Oriki. Open the phone room, Oludumare Oba Jiki, Mojilon, Mowoglum Mariai, Iba Ila Orun, Iba Iwo Orun, Iba Riva, Iba Gusu, Iba Oba Igba Aye. Iba Orun Oke, Iba Baba, Iba Yeye, Iba Atiwo Orun. All right, so let's get right into tonight's lesson. All right, tonight's lesson, as I mentioned before, the subject tonight is taboo. All right, so and as usual, the format that I use, I'm going to look at the etymology of the word taboo. And after I do that, then we would get into some of the Yoruba word equivalent, and then we would get into the meat of the subject. The root word for the word taboo is tab. All right, and a tab, by definition of the concise Oxford Dictionary of English Etymology, is a short, broad strip, right, depending or projecting piece on a dress. And well, they have the US definition, which is reckoning. All right, so of course, reckoning would have to do with calculations. All right, so therefore, you could see from the word tab, words like tabulate and words of that nature having to do with reckoning or calculating. All right, now the word taboo itself, spelled Taboo, as well as Tabu, which is the Tongan spelling for the word. The definition is consecrated or restricted to a special use, prohibited or violable, right? And all of these definitions came from the concise Oxford Dictionary of English Etymology. I'm going to look now at the definitions that came from the Oxford Dictionary of English. All right, and it reads, the setting of something apart, either as consecrated or accursed. The idea of prohibition being conveyed in either sense. The state of being set apart. All right? The other definition they have here is to place under a ban, interdicted, prohibited, interdicted, and proscribed. All right? All of these definitions came from the Webster Dictionary. All right? Babe. Now, as long as you're looking at something that is set apart for a particular reason, and you're dealing with the issue of it being consecrated or even accursed, then of course you would have to look at the word sacrifice. In one of our previous streams, we looked in depth at what a sacrifice was, right? But that would be to refreshing those who follow the program regularly. And for those who probably for the first time taking in the stream, I'm going to go a little bit into what is a sacrifice, because that is very closely related to taboo. All right? From the Yoruba belief and sacrificial rites by J. Omoshade Awolalu, PhD. I'm going to read two of his definitions that he gave in this book on what a sacrifice is. He said that sacrifice is an act of making an offering to a deity or a spiritual being. Right? And in brackets, he said this offering could be animal or vegetable life, food, drink, or any object. All right? He goes on to say, in another sense, sacrifice can be seen as something consecrated and offered to God or a divinity. In other words, an offering of any kind laid on an altar or otherwise presented to a deity or divinities for definite purpose is a sacrifice. The practice varies from religion to religion in detail, but essentially they are similar. It has various intents and purpose. All right? Now he goes on to explain the purpose of sacrifice. He says, behind every offering of any sacrifice, there is always a definite purpose. There is no aimlessness in a offering, and we assert that no one ever makes a sacrifice without having a goal in view. All right, now I'm continuing to read some of his material. He said, Thanksgiving and communion forms one type of sacrifice. All right, and in a previous stream, we spoke about Saraka being a form of thanksgiving as well as communion with the ancestors. So I did do a stream on Saraka. So for those wanting to view that stream, they could go on the suitable networks, and it's also available on YouTube. I will tell you what networks down to the end, right? So Thanksgiving and communion is one form of sacrifice. There is also what is called a votive sacrifice. There is a propitiatory sacrifice or propitiatory sacrifice. There is a preventative sacrifice, which, by the way, is really this particular one called a preventative sacrifice that we are going to be looking into quite a bit tonight. All right? A preventative sacrifice, the definition is once a person goes by the directives of an oracle, it is believed he will easily avoid getting into trouble. But when the directive of the oracle is ignored, the consequences can be grave. All right? So that is just the definition for this particular one called a preventative sacrifice. I will name two others. There is also a substitutory sacrifice, and there is a foundation sacrifice. All right? Now, Ifa verses that set precedents for taboos being applied after divination in the form of compliance of the admonition given. There are Ifa stanzas that demonstrate the application of taboos. All right. Now, because Ifa verses set precedents, that would mean that all of the things that we believe and practice, the standard from which we derive these practices would be the Ifa verses. All right. And in the issue of taboos, Ejiogbe, in two of the verses, they speak of it. Ogunda Irosun speaks of it. Oyeku Osa speaks of it. Owori Ogbe also speaks of it. Ogbe Obara, or Barada, speaks of it. Odi Ogbe, or Eden Be, speaks of it. Ogbe Ka, or Ogbe Ika, speaks of it also. Ogbe Ogunda, Owori Ika, Osa Meji, Oyeku Meji, Ogbe Oyeku, Ogbe Odi, Irosun Meji, Ogbe Iyuno, or Ogbe Ogunda, Oturapon Ogbe also speaks of it. All right, these essay Ifas that speaks of it could be found in the book Pathway to Ifa by Solagbade Popola. All right, now in terms of taboos could take different forms, right? Now, some taboos are permanent, right? Most of the taboos that are considered to be permanent taboos would be taboos that are associated to either initiation or important rituals like Isantai and these things. All right? Now, generally, when a person visits a Babalawo or does consultation, even if they do it on their own, like, for example, on Oshe Ifa, which is every 4 days, these taboos are considered to be temporary taboos. All right, but sometimes on rare occasions during such consultation, the taboo could be given as a permanent taboo. All right, examples of taboos would be food items, the color of the clothing that you wear, the use of liquor, that's drinking, as well as there might be other activities that you may be forbidden or restricted from participating in for your own best interest. All right, now sometimes while you might be the one given the taboo and you might be upholding the restriction, in some cases, if you have a spouse and the spouse participates in the thing that is tabooed for you, you are still going to be affected. All right? So, I've given the definitions of taboos. I've explained the type of taboos. I've mentioned different types of sacrifices. So now what we are going to look at is the Yoruba word for taboo, because the word taboo is an English word. All right? And also it exists also in the language of the Tonga people. All right? The word in Yoruba for taboo is Eewo. Right? That word is spelled E-E-W-O, and there is a full stop below the O. It is pronounced Eewo. All right? This is possessed by everyone. Right? Eewo I'm making reference to. That which is forbidden for them to eat, if consumed, the person becomes sick and can die if sufficient care is not taken of them immediately. It is believed that one can only know one's taboo or one's Eewo by divination through Ifa. All right? Now, in modern science, medical science, you would hear people speak of allergy. All right? Because from what I just described, if one partakes of one's taboo, it is possible that one could lose their life. And this is an extreme case that we're speaking of. Taboos or Eewos could also have other types of ill effects on persons and not just necessarily their life. All right. In this case, we speak of a person becoming very ill, and as I mentioned, we may know of such things in modern science as allergies. All right. But in our tradition, it goes a lot deeper than a simple allergic reaction. In many instances, when taboos are mentioned, it is because, especially during divination, it also has spiritual implications. All right? Now, what I just mentioned about it being forbidden and it can make you sick and all of that, Oyeku Meiji tells the story, all right, of the betrayal of death by his wife, whose name was Ayurin. All right, what she did is she told his enemies what his taboos were, and his enemies prepared a meal that appeared to be normal, but in it contained his taboo, and death died as a result of that. All right, so Oyeku Meiji kind of sets the precedent for being aware of your Eewo and how it could have an extremely adverse or a deleterious or a fatal effect on a person. All right? Now, this involves also spiritual taboos, as I just mentioned, or forbidden actions that are connected to a person's Ori. All right? Remember, we've discussed Ori before, and we spoke of the importance of a person having good communion, or in the Ifa community, we say alignment with one's Ori. All right? So when you go for divination and you are told, listen, you should avoid this particular food, you should avoid wearing this color clothes, or you should avoid passing a particular place, you may be given a description of a place. And you are told that anytime you find yourself going to a place and it looks like this, turn back. You know? So these taboos come in all of these various forms, right? And again, the word taboo is the English word. The Yoruba word is Eewo. All right? And that is important for us to remember. But now we're going to look at some other aspects of taboo. Because so far, we have spoken about dietary type restrictions that are related to taboos. We have spoken about the color clothes that you wear that relates also to taboos. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some behavioral patterns that are related to Eewos and taboos that could affect a person adversely. And during divination, you might be advised, listen, you know, you have a way about you. You don't give people a chance to talk. What you need to do from today, this is what we read in the consultation here, and we are advising you. You need to stop speaking that much and start listening to other people when you're interacting with people. So this may seem strange to some people, that you would be told to modify your behavior. These type of restrictions are behavioral considerations for Eewo. And sometimes when you go for divination, you may be given that type of advice. So now we have dietary restrictions, clothing, and we just added the dimension where you would be required to change your behavior. Now, mind you, all of these things fall under the category of sacrifice, which I've mentioned earlier. I've called out all the different types of sacrifices that you can make, and it included preventative sacrifice, and that form of sacrifice is primarily what you receive when you go for divination. Now, let's talk a little bit about dietary restrictions. Let's look at a little bit of biology and a little bit of chemistry. Now, foods that causes allergic reactions, from a modern medical perspective, they would tell you that the chemical composition of the particular thing that you consume may cause an autoimmune reaction in your body, which means the chemical substance in the food stuff that you are told not to eat that has a chemical reaction. The reason that reaction occurs is because the particular chemicals are not harmonious with the chemical substances in your body. This is purely from a medical perspective. This is no mystery. This is no magic. This is pure science. Our ancestors, for thousands of years, have understood these things to a great extent, but in a by far more advanced way. And I would demonstrate what I mean. I would illustrate it by giving an example. When our ancestors prepare medicine, or what is called a kosher, for a client or for a person who needs help, the person would go home, they would ingest the medicine for over a certain number of days. And at the end of that period of time, whatever problems was identified that recommended this medicine disappears. And to a lot of us, this appears to be magic because we don't understand the science behind it. However, our ancestors know that even the things we consume has a spiritual vibration. And the spiritual vibration of everything has the potential to create the type of environment to attract or repel particular things. In science, in atomic science in particular, where we look at the molecule or the molecular structure in the atomic particles of everything, we know that they carry particular charges. And because they carry particular electrical charges, they can either attract or repel. But because of the advanced knowledge of our ancestors, they could have put together a range of natural things that would create the phenomenon that today we call magic. That is not really magic at all. In reality, it's science. About 3 streams ago, I mentioned the German chemist that has been credited for biochemistry. What this German scientist did is he compounded various food items together to create all the different minerals that the human body utilizes. And I would assume this is after he observed indigenous people performing these acts. He took it to a laboratory. So what he was able to do now is not only was he able to combine all of these things, but he also noticed the indigenous people would burn it. And when I say indigenous, I'm talking about our ancestors. So what happened when they burnt the food, all the different herbs and products and animal parts and whatever combined together, when they burn it, it advances into a state of breakdown where it is very easy for your body to assimilate it and use it rapidly. Because normally when we consume food and we ingest food, it goes through a burning inside of our digestive system. This is one of the reasons why our body carries a particular temperature. Because the process that we call digestion is actually the burning up of the food that we take into our body. And it is only when that sort of ash is produced in our body is it readily absorbed into our blood. All right, this is what we know now today with modern science. But this is what our ancestors have known a very long time. As a result of which they could apply these things. Now, beside dietary restriction, I've just introduced the whole concept of certain behavioral modifications that could come in the form of restrictions or taboos or Eewos. Let's take a look now at a couple of other cultures who also, and I'm talking about indigenous and ancient cultures, who also participates in Eewo, right, in taboos and restrictions that do not call it by the same name as we do. And I'm going to point out a few of them. Now, the people who practice Judaism, they have categories of food that are governed by specific rules. For example, the Jewish people, the people who follow Hebrew tradition, they have two categories of food that they use: kosher food and pave food. Foods that are kosher comes with particular rules. All right? The rules that the Hebrew people follow is called kashrut. What kashrut involves is what you eat, how it is prepared, and how you combine all the different things that you prepare into one meal. That is the aspect that is referred to as kosher. So sometimes people talking and you getting a little kicks, boy, that is songing too kosher, nah? That kosher they're talking about come from this same term that gives dietary rules. In other words, by giving the rules, it excludes other things. The term pave, which is a term they also use, the Hebrew people, is in reference to food that is non-meat and non-dairy. All right, so note well, non-meat and non-dairy. So what they're doing is they're restricting their intake of meat and dairy. All right, beside these dietary restrictions, the Hebrew people also have festivals and high holidays that are celebrated on the new moon. Normally preceding the high feast for these high holidays, they have a period of fasting, which is abstinence from food. They restrict the hours that they are allowed to ingest food. These are forms of Eewo and Taboo that is practiced within that tradition. All right, so note now, remember quite well that all things physical exist in various combinations of the four elements. So I'm going to talk now about another tradition, right? And in this case, it's going to be Islam, where you may have heard, right? Because, we're not Muslims, but we may have neighbors, friends, co-workers, family that might be Muslim. You would hear people talk about what is halal and what is haram. Again, these things again are based on Islamic dietary laws. That is how they determine what is forbidden, which is haram, all right, and what is permissible, which is halal. Beside the rules that apply, the Islamic rules or laws, the Islamic dietary laws that applies to what is permissible and what is not permissible, there would also be things like fasting during the month of Ramadan, which is a form of Eewo or taboo, because they have restrictions on when they can eat. All right, so I hope you all seeing the parallel here between all these traditions. Now, the thing about what is called halal and haram, the fact that it falls under Islamic dietary laws, we also have to look at their whole legal framework that is referred to as fiqh and sharia, which is their whole jurisprudence system of how they operate law, right? But these two concepts are concepts that are considered to be divinely inspired or given from God. So it's not one day somebody just wake up and decide, okay, we're not going to eat pork and we're going to do this and we're not going to do that because it's bad for we and this and that. No. Their belief is that these things came from divine inspiration. So based on that, they are guided in a way that would improve their health, improve their spirituality, and improve their style of life. And remember, every form of sacrifice is always aimed at a particular purpose or outcome, as I've mentioned before. During the month of Shaban, which is supposed to be the month when the Prophet Muhammad received revelation from God, they normally abstain during that time and pray. All right? Of course, every sacrifice, as I've mentioned just now, is with an aim and an intention. It is the belief of Muslims that at the end of that period of time, that most of their sins or any action that may not have been considered right or along the lines of their religious belief will be forgiven. So even this form of sacrifice that we call fasting is purposeful and intentional. I'm going to give one more example. In Vedanta, right? Or we live in Trinidad, we have Hindus here. Normally, most Hindus fast prior to Diwali. All right? This form of fasting, of course, affects their diet and it also affects their behavior. Because during the time while you're fasting, you're praying with the intention, of course, of having good things manifest in your life and have all the dark things, all the negative things, or sin, if you want to call it that, removed. So within all of these traditions, right? I haven't quoted any surah. I ain't quote no Bible, no Torah. I ain't quote no Bhagavad Gita. But I'm just mentioning these things so that we can all see and understand that relationship. I am not saying that it is the same as Ifa, but what I am showing is the relationship, because the Yoruba worldview is relatively different to all the other worldviews that exist. All right? Now, in our tradition, there are many things that are considered taboo, and I'm going to run down a list of some of the things that was set by the precedents of this SAE4 or this Odu Ifa. All right? In the Odu, Ika Ofun, the diviner told the 16 elders that they would live long if they would follow these rules. Right? I believe what was happening at the time is many of the elders were dying young, and they wanted to find out what was the cause of that. So they went to the diviner, and the diviner advised them. He said, if you all just follow these 16 rules here, your lives should change. You all should be able to live long and experience wealth and happiness while here. These are the 16 rules that were given. All right, now I want everybody to listen to all of them, and then, different things may come to mind. You're all free to comment, and you could say what comes to mind when I read the 16. The first thing that was given is you shall not lie. All right? There are many SAEFAs that supports this first rule of the 16. All right? I've done streams before on that. The second rule is you should not perform initiation, or divination without complete knowledge. The third one is you should not mislead people with wrong information. The fourth one is you should not deceive people financially or spiritually. The fifth rule, you should not claim a wisdom that you are not entitled to. The sixth one is you should humble yourself and not be egocentric. The seventh rule is you should not be treacherous. Now, I hope you all see is how many things you shouldn't do. So these are taboos. These are the taboos in our tradition. If the elders follow these, they're going to live long. All right? This was the advice of the diviner they went to. In the Odu, Ika Ofun. All right? Number 8 is you should take taboos seriously. Number 9, you should not break taboos. Number 10, you should always be trustworthy. Number 11, you should not take a walking cane from a blind person or a blind elder, right? And in brackets, it says, respect elders. All right? Number 12, you should not take a cane from an elderly. Respect your elders and seniors in thought, actions, and speech. All right, so we reached the part here now where you're getting one or two things that you should and should not do. All right, you should not take an Ogboni's wife or husband. In other words, they are telling you here, you must respect moral laws. Immoral conduct is considered a taboo in our tradition. You should not sleep with your friend's wife or husband or spouse. Do not betray your friends or acquaintances. Let me read this one again. You should not sleep with your friend's wife or husband or spouse. Do not betray your friends or acquaintances. Next one, number 15. You should not go behind and discuss secrets. Do not gossip, whether true or false. Do not betray trust given to you. Control yourself and let others be. All right? The key here, don't discuss secrets, don't gossip, and don't betray trust given to you. Control yourself, have self-discipline, and let others be. All right? The last one and the 16th one, that is a rule of our tradition, says, you should not disrespect, look, or behave contemptuously towards a Babalawo or an Olorisha or your Olowo. All right? Olorisha being devotee. All right? You should not disrespect, look, or behave contemptuously towards a Babalawo, Olorisha, or your Olowo. Do not seek to manipulate your elders, teachers, or anyone else through conduct, speech, or other means. All right? These are the general advice that was given by the diviner in the Odu Ika Ofun. All right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about law, because basically when we talk about taboos and Eewos, when we telling people don't do this and don't do that and do this and fast, and these are basically laws. All right? So when we look at the history of law, we would find that the most ancient laws known to man were the 42 negative confessions. That is the oldest. There's no question about that. All right? This appears in the Book of the Dead in chapter 125. These 42 negative confessions by Wallace Bulge. Right? After the 42 negative confession came a document that is called the Hammurabi Code, or Hammurabia Code, or Hammurabi Code. All right? After which developed what is called the Decemvirate Code, then the Roman law, then the Ten Commandments, then the common law, and then today the modern system of law. All right? So I gave this history of law just to tell us that it is very, very important if you are a part of a society, part of a community, a part of a tradition. It is governed by rules and laws and regulations. Our tradition is no exception. When we discuss destiny, which I think last stream, right? The topic was not destiny, but I mentioned the work of destiny, that every person comes to earth with a particular duty and a particular responsibility that is based on a contract, on an agreement that was made. So there are, in fact, rules that governs our very action just by virtue of us being born here on IA. All right? So I would encourage everyone who haven't made notes that you could also always look at this stream again and become familiar with these 16 laws that would guarantee us long life on earth. All right? Now, that's basically the lesson for today. All right? I just want to go on for some of the people who listen to the stream. All right? In Trinidad and Tobago, we carry Atlantic Standard Time. So people who would be seeing this live stream recording later on, I want you to know if you're in Nigeria, you would have to log in at 11 p.m. in order to get this live broadcast. If you are in the USA, there is only 1 hour difference. So when we start at 6, you could come on at 7 to take in the stream. For persons in England, 10 p.m., right? Which is UK time. And for persons in Canada, you would have to log on at 5 p.m., right? Which is Eastern time zone. All right. Now, let me tell you all where you could actually see this stream after this live has ended. You can see this stream on the Orisa Tradition Discussion Group of Trinidad on Facebook. You could also see the stream on Grassroots Education and Entertainment Network on Facebook. You could see the stream on the Ifa Bemero home of Ifa Orisa Tradition, both on YouTube and on Facebook. On this particular network, the Ifa Bemero home of Ifa Orisa Tradition, I have well over 100 videos on Ifa. So if you're looking for better understanding of Ifa, you should log into YouTube on the Ifa Bemero home of Ifa Orisa Tradition. All right. These streams could also be viewed on the Ifa Orisa Community Congress on Facebook, on the Traditional Herbal Health Network International on Facebook, on the Ifa Orisa Institute of Sacred and Divine Science on Facebook, on the Autochthonous Island People Tradition Community Group on Facebook, and on YouTube at the Bue Medzi Family Temple or the Ile Ijuba AG Okbe group on YouTube. All right. So that's it basically for my announcement. And all right, I understand I have a question to address. Let me see how best I could address the question. All right, the question here is, is my husband taboo? Mine's also. All right, I'm going to answer this question. Now, I mentioned it earlier in tonight's stream that if you have a taboo and your spouse does not keep that taboo, it is going to affect you. Why? Because if it is your spouse, 2 of you all are considered to be one spiritually. Right? When you come together, you are recognized as one spirit. All right? When you come together with your spouse, all of your chemical energy, your spiritual energy and everything is exchanged with your spouse. As a result of which, anything that is of a spiritual nature would not affect your spouse and not affect you, or would not affect you and not affect your spouse. All right, so the answer to that is your spouse should recognize your taboo also. All right, taboo is serious business. All right, not because you're given a taboo, you violate the taboo and you don't see it, it kill you immediately. It means that it's not affecting your life. It doesn't work like that. There are many things we cannot see that affects us. I mean, if you could show me a toothache, it's good. You might be able to show me the teeth, but you can't show me the toothache. So, in like manner, there are things that affect us that we do not see. So the answer to that question is, if you have a taboo, Your spouse should know about that taboo, and your spouse should also recognize the taboo. And your spouse have the responsibility to keep your taboo a secret. All right? Because that is how Eewo was killed. His wife told his enemies his taboo. All right? So with that, I would like to thank everyone for coming in tonight and listening to the stream. And I want to let you know, as I always do, you do good for yourself. You do bad for yourself. So, always do good. Don't do bad. You would live long. You would live prosperous. That is the promise of Ifa. It is also the promise of the ancestors and the Himalayas. If you are truthful, they will always support you. They will never neglect you. So sometimes being truthful is very hard because sometimes you hurt people's feelings. Sometimes, there is repercussions for you being truthful. But Ifa suggests always that we be truthful. The ancestors has promised to support all of those who speak truth. All right? And again, the first rule of the 16 was do not tell lies or do not lie. All right? With that, I want to say, may Olodumare bless you. May he bless your family. May he bless your community. May he bless us all as one nation. And see you next week. Odabo, and you take care.